At tayo po magsisimula na sa ating Sunday School. Ay bukas na po ating mga camera. At tayo sasamba muli sa Panginoon sa unang bahagi ng ating pagsamba sa pag-aaral ng salita ng Diyos. And before we start mawit muna tayo sa ating Panginoon. Awitin po natin Redeem.
Redeemed, how I love to proclaim it. Redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed through His infinite mercy. His child and forever I am. Redeemed, redeemed, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed, redeemed. His child and forever I am. Redeemed and so happy in Jesus. No language my rapture can tell. I know that the light of His presence with me doth continually dwell. Redeemed, redeemed, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed, redeemed, His child and forever I am. I think of my blessed Redeemer, I think of Him all the day long. I sing for I cannot be silent, His love is the theme of my song. Redeemed, redeemed, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed, redeemed, His child and forever I am. I know I shall see in His beauty the King in whose law I delight, who lovingly guardeth my footsteps and giveth me songs in the night. Redeemed, redeemed, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed, redeemed, His child and forever I am.
Giling ko po si Brother Roy to open us in prayer.
Let us pray. Aming Diyos na dakila, purihin ka Panginoon sa umagang ito. Purihin ka Ama sapagkat muli ginabayan niyo kami sa buong magdamag. Salamat sa araw na ito Panginoon. At muli may bibigay po namin ang mga papurit pagsamba sa inyong dakilang pangalan. Kayo po siyang patuloy na manguna sa aming gawain ngayong umaga Panginoon at gayon din sa aming Sunday School. Pagpalain niyo po Panginoon ang magbibigay po ng inyong mga mensahe at ang magtuturo Panginoon sa umagang ito. Salamat po Panginoon at patawarin niyo po kami sa lahat ng mga pagkukulang. Ito po ay aming dalangin sa pangalan ni Jesus. Amen.
Before tayo magsimula sa ating bagong lesson, let's share our memory verse sa oras na ito.
Memory verse, Matthew 21:22. And whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive it if you have faith.
Ephesians 5:6. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of the strange the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Ephesians 5:6.
Psalm 90 verse 11, who knows the power of your anger, for as the fear of you, so is your wrath.
Sige. Jeremiah 10:10. But the Lord is the true God, the living God, and the everlasting King. At his wrath, the earth will tremble, and the nations will not be able to abide his indignation.
So wala na po ba? Okay, then let's give the time to our Sunday school teacher this time. Let's make our hearts ready and our mind. Let's call on our beloved teacher, Teacher Ira.
Good morning po. Naririnig niyo po ako?
Yes, Teacher Ira.
Yes,
Thank you po.
amen.
So welcome po again sa ating Sunday school at still we are on our material discerning the plight of man. At tayo po ay today will be discussing yung part 2 po ng ating lesson on the disposition, God's disposition toward the sinner, and we are talking about the wrath of God. So bago po ako mag-proceed sa bago nating lesson, quick review lang po tayo sa reviews na na-discuss natin. At last time po, no, napag-aralan natin yung iba't ibang aspects of the wrath of God. Natutunan natin that God's wrath is a part of His nature, na because He is holy and righteous, therefore He must judge wickedness and condemn it. At natutunan din natin that yung intensity of the wrath of God, it is so intense that no one is able to understand it and no one will be able to endure it. At tutunan din natin that the wrath of God, yung manifestation, yung complete revelation ng wrath of God is certain, naman siya on the day of His righteous, and it is certain, hindi lang sa na i-express niya yon sa mga sin. Natutunan din natin yung extensity of the wrath of God, na yung wrath of God ay nag-extend hanggang sa third and fourth generation. So today po ay ipagpapatuloy natin, or we will continue our study wrath of God, and we will focusing on the languages na ginamit ng scriptures to describe God's wrath. So this is biblical descriptions of God's wrath. So sa tapos tayo dito ng iba't ibang mga terms to describe the wrath of God. Simulan po natin sa Old Testament description. So from the Old Testament's description of Nahum 1 verse 2. Sige po, if you're there po, can you read it to us? Nahum 1:2. O sabi ng Bible.
Nahum 1, verse 2. God is jealous and the Lord avenges. The Lord avenges and is furious. The Lord will take vengeance on his adversaries and he reserves wrath for his enemies.
Alright, thank you po. So sa chapter po na to, si Nahum po is predicting the Lord's judgment on Nineveh sa kanyang oppression, cruelty, idolatry, at sa wickedness ng lugar. And also in this chapter, Nahum speaks about God as the great judge. He speaks about God as the all-powerful ruler of the universe. At nabanggit din dyan ni Nahum na on one hand, God is patient with the rebellious, but He is also zealous for righteousness. Now, we will look how is God described dyan po sa verse. Paano po describe dyan sa verse ang Panginoon? Ayan. Ano po sabi ng verse? The Lord is avenging and what?
Jealous.
Jealous, yes. And ayun yung starts with W.
Wrath.
So sa translation po na ginamit ko, ang sabi po dito, the Lord is avenging and wrathful. Ano pong ibig sabihin ng word na wrathful? So yung word po na yan is from the Hebrew phrase Baal Hema. So yung Baal po, it refers to an own possessor or Lord. Tapos po yung Hema po, it denotes heat, rage, anger, and wrath. So pag pinag-combine po yung words, it literally mean a possessor of hot or burning wrath. So ibig sabihin po dyan, ng Panginoon is described as a possessor or yung may anong tawag ng possessor? Nagpo-possess siya ng hot burning wrath. Na ang ibig sabihin dyan, his punishment of the guilty ay severe, but it is also just. No? Kapag yung wrath of God is poured out on sinners, no one can escape. Ayan po yung ibig sabihin ng the Lord is avenging and wrathful. The Lord possesses a wrath that is burning and fuming. Ganun po yung galit na meron yung Panginoon. Alright? And then also, hindi lang dinescribe dyan as wrathful ang Panginoon. It also says sa last part, ano po sabi ng verse sa last part? Ano po sabi ng verse sa last part? He what? The Lord what?
Reserves wrath for his enemies.
Alright. The Lord reserves wrath for his enemies. So, again po, yung word na wrath, adyan sa verse ay from the word hema, na ang ibig sabihin, hema, na ibig sabihin ay heat or rage or anger and wrath. Pero yung word po na reserves dyan is from the Hebrew word natar, na ang ibig sabihin naman po is to keep or to hold. Parang ito po yung idea ng last week, yung verse na pinag-aralan natin, yung because of your stubbornness, you are storing up wrath. So, ganun din yung Panginoon. No, He reserves wrath for His enemies. No, God can protect those who trust Him, but God can destroy those who fight against Him. And this is a warning to all of God's enemies na it is useless to plot against God kasi kayang-kaya ng Panginoon na i-destroy sila with one blow because the Lord reserves wrath for His enemies. This is the kind of God na pinag-uusapan natin dito. No? The Lord is avenging and wrathful. Na yung galit niya is so intense that it is burning and fuming, and this is reserved for His enemies. Okay, so yan po yung descriptions, yung Old Testament's description of God. Napunta naman po tayo sa New Testament. New Testament. So this is New Testament's description of God. So yung wrath of God, hindi lang siya confined sa Old Testament. It is also presented in the New Testament. Sige, pabuksan niyo po yung Bibles niyo on Romans 3, verse 5.
Advance ako. Advance.
Somebody read Romans 3:5.
Romans 3, verse 5. But if your unrighteousness demonstrate the righteousness of God, what shall we say? Is God unjust? Who inflicts wrath? I speak as a man.
Alright. So si Paul po dyan ay nakikipag-usap sa sarili niya. But we will look at how is God described in the verse. Paano po din-describe ang Panginoon dyan? Anong klaseng God daw siya? The God who what? Anong klaseng God ang dinidescribe dyan sa Romans 3 verse 5? Sorry.
Inflict wrath.
Alright. The God who inflicts wrath. So yung word po na inflicts, this is it's translated from the Greek word epipero, which means to bring upon or against another. And then yung word po na wrath dyan is from the Greek word orge, which denotes wrath or anger. So dito po sinasabi ng verse na to na yung divine wrath of God is not a natural consequence for sinful action. Hindi lang siya natural consequence for sinful action. Nakita niyo po yung word na inflict dyan. No? Ibig sabihin niya na God is active in bringing His righteous wrath upon sa mga unrepentant sinner. Sabi dyan, di ba? Ang ibig sabihin po ng word na inflict is to bring upon or against another. Ibig sabihin, gagawin ng Panginoon. No? Ibubuhos niya yung wrath niya. Hindi lang to basta sinasabi, no? The Lord will actively do it. Okay? So yan po yung idea ng the kind of God na merong wrath. Dinidiscuss natin ngayon. And also in Hebrews 12:29. Bakit nakataas na yung mga box?
Kaya ko nabigay niyan. Hindi ako ano.
Dinownload mo ba yun?
Ang baka
Sige po. Somebody read Hebrews 12:29.
Hebrews 12:29. For our God is a consuming fire.
Alright. God is what?
Consuming fire.
A consuming fire. So God is described here as a consuming fire. So yung fire po throughout the scriptures, it is one of the most used na ginagamit to describe the wrath of God, and it is also described as one of the most terrifying forces, isa sa mga pinaka-nakakatakot na forces of nature. So ganun po din describe dito. And the word consuming is from the Greek word kanalisko, which dito po yung writer of Hebrew nagbibigay siya ng image God. Sabi niya, fire na nagpapakita kung gaano yung ng Panginoon sa mga nagde-defy sa Kanya. Ibig sabihin lang nito na yung wrath of God, no, lahat ng madadaanan niyang path. Fire. No, kagaya ng sinabi ni Moses sa Exodus 15:7, sabi ni Moses doon, you send forth your burning and it consumes them. No, yung word po na them doon, it refers to the wicked. It consumes them as chaff. Yung pag sinabi po nating chaff, yun yung nalimutan ko, tinanong ko na to. Yung balat ng palay, anong bigas? Yung ipa, yon. So, parang ganun kabilis mag-consume yung, di ba pag sinunog natin yung mabilis siya kumalat yung apoy. Ganun po yung apoy na dinidescribe dito sa God as a consuming fire. So, isa ito dapat sa mga kinatatakutan ng mga unrepentant sinner. Kasi ganito yung klase ng God na mag-express ng wrath niya at the day of His judgment. No? Again, He is an avenging God. He reserves wrath for His sinners, or His enemies. He inflicts wrath and God who is a consuming fire. Ayan po yung type of na express or magre-reveal ng kanyang wrath at the day of His judgment. Is who God is as a God of wrath. Now, at the different terms na ginamit in the scripture for describing God's wrath. Different terms, ito po ay different terms for describing God's wrath. So throughout the scriptures po, iba't ibang mga terms ang ginamit to describe the wrath of God, and we are going to consider some of the terms. So open niyo po yung Bible niyo in Exodus 15 verse 7. Exodus 15 verse 7. Diyan pa po ba kayo?
Exodus 15 verse 7. And in the
Amen.
of your excellence, you have overthrown those who rose against you. You sent forth for your wrath, which consumed them like stubble.
Yung ginamit na term dyan to describe
Burning anger.
ano po? Again?
Burning anger.
Right. Thank you po. So, describe, phrase po na yan is from a charon, C-H-A-R, which yun nga, burning ng boy. Na ano naman po yung ginamit na term sa Deuteronomy 9:19. Sige po, buksan. Deuteronomy 9:19. nagno-notes, is-send naman po yung presentation slides. Sige po, ano pong sabi sa Deuteronomy 9:19? Ano po yung dyan to describe God's wrath?
Deuteronomy 9:19, for I was afraid of the anger and hot displeasure with which the Lord was wrathful against you in order to destroy you. But the Lord listened to me that time also.
Ano po yung term na ginamit to describe God's wrath?
Anger and hot displeasure.
Alright. Displeasure. Okay, so case po na yan is single Hebrew word hema, no, yung kagaya ng ginamit kanina. Again means it which again denotes rage, anger. So again, una, burning anger. Second is hot displeasure. So ay makikita niyo sa Psalm 7 verse 11. Sige, papakibasa Psalm 7 verse 11.
Psalm 7, verse 11. God is a just judge, and God is angry with the wicked every day.
Alright. So, ano po yung term na ginamit dyan? God
God is righteous God.
a righteous. What? Ano yung meron ng Panginoon? Ayan, nasabi una.
Indignation. Indignation.
19 po na version ng Bible.
Sir,
So,
nawawala ka.
God is a right God who has ano pa?
Indignation.
Naglalag ka, teacher.
Putol-putol, Sir.
Patayin ko na lang ako.
Ayan, hello na ako.
Putol-putol pa rin, Sir.
Indignation. Everett.
Hello. Putol-putol pa din.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes po.
Your bandwidth is low daw, teacher.
Medyo mahina po ata. Wait lang po. Hello, okay na po ba?
Okay na, Sir.
Okay na po.
Ayan. Ayan po. So, going word po ay yung term po
Wala na ulit, teacher.
Nagdalag pa din po.
Hello. Hello po.
Hi.
Naririnig na po ba ako ng malinaw?
Okay na po, teacher.
Di na lang po mag-on camera. Will that be okay po?
Okay na, Teach. Okay na.
Sige po. So, going back po again, no, yung word, yung term po na ginamit dito sa verse is the word indignation. It's from the Hebrew word za'am, which communicates intense anger. So, hindi lang basta anger yung nararamdaman ng Panginoon, but it is an intense anger. At last week nga, napag-aralan natin yung intensity ng kanyang anger na this is a kind of anger that no one is able to understand and no one will be able to endure it. No? And another term po na ginamit for describing wrath of God is found in Psalm 90 verse 11. Can you turn to Psalm 90 verse 11? Okay, basa po.
Psalm 90, verse 11. Who knows the power of your anger? For as the fear of you, so is your wrath.
All right. So, ano po yung ginamit dyan na term?
Fury po.
Fury.
All right. The word fury. Okay, so the word fury is from the Hebrew verb na ebra, which means to pass over or to overflow. Okay, so it's from the Hebrew verb ebra, meaning to pass over or overflow. And ano pong kino-communicate ito about the wrath of God? It describes the wrath of God as a raging river. No, parang rumaragasang ilog na yung water is nag-overflow sa banks at it's carrying away all that is in the path. So ganun po yung galit na dinedescribe, no, ng word na fury. So the wrath of God is like a raging river. No, sinabi po na to pass over or overflow. Ayun po yung ibig sabihin ng word na fury from its original term. And also in Jeremiah 30 verse 24. Yan, Jeremiah 30 verse 24. Basahin ko po. The fierce anger of the Lord will not turn back until he has performed and until he has accomplished the intent of his heart. In the latter days, you will understand this. So yung term po na ginamit dito sa Jeremiah 30:24 is the term fierce anger. Okay, so this is from the two Hebrew words, haron, denoting burning, fierceness, or fury, and the word ap, which literally means nostril or nose. Na pag yung word po na yan, it denotes anger na nag-aapoy sa nostrils, sa ilong, no? So this is a sign of anger. Ganun po yung anger na dinedescribe dito. At that is the anger na pinopossess ng ating Panginoon. So from the terms burning anger, hot displeasure, indignation, yung term na fury and fierce anger, ano po ngayon yung kino-communicate nito sa inyo about the wrath of God? Can somebody share po? Based po sa mga terms na encounter natin, yung terms na burning anger, hot displeasure, indignation, fury, fierce anger, ano po yung kino-communicate nito sa inyo about the wrath of God? Ano po yung sinasabi nito sa inyo about God's wrath? Can I hear an answer po?
Na ang,
Sige po, go ahead.
na ang Panginoon po ay nagpo-possess or nasa kanya yung mga katangian na na to. So, yung wrath ng Panginoon, ano talaga siya, totoo. Ibig sabihin, i-exercise niya yon dun sa mga unjust, sa mga hindi sumusunod sa kanya. Kaya, parang, kasi 'di ba, ako personally, yung pagkakilala ko sa Panginoon, ano lang siya mabait na Diyos lang siya forgiving God lang siya Pero dito, pinapakita din, based dun sa napag-aralan natin ngayon, na pinapakita din yung isang side ng Panginoon, yung isang ano niya, yung isang katangian niya na hindi natin dapat baliwalain. Kasi 'di ba, ano din to warning din to para dun sa mga yung mga hindi sumusunod sa Panginoon or yung binabaliwala lang siya.
Alright, thank you so much po for sharing. So that's true, no? Maraming mga tao na nag-i-ignore ng wrath of God. No, na yun nga sinasabi nila na mabait lang ang Panginoon, no? How can a good God express wrath? But again, no, the scripture is clear about how intense, no, about how true yung wrath na meron ang Panginoon. So meron talagang puot ang Panginoon. No? At yan ay malinaw na malinaw po na pinaliwanag ng Biblia. Now, let's look at the different metaphors naman po. Different metaphors for describing God's wrath. Sige po, review tayo ng konting English. Pag sinabi po nating metaphor, ano pong ibig sabihin?
Direct comparison.
Alright. Paghahambing or direct comparison. So, ito pong mga words na may encounter natin, ito naman po ay mga words din na ginamit para i-describe yung wrath of God or an object or an action na inihalintulad sa wrath of God. Una po is from Deuteronomy 32:22. Sige po, buksan niyo yung Bibles niyo. Deuteronomy 32 verse 22. Next slide muna po para makita nila yung word.
Exodus 32 verse 22. For a fire is kindled in my anger and shall burn to the lowest hell. It shall consume the earth with her increase and set on fire the foundations of the mountains.
Alright. So ano pong metaphor ang ginamit dyan?
Fire.
Alright. A fire that what? Starts with letter C. A fire that
Consume.
consumes. Okay, so yung apoy na nangangain. So parang yun nga, yung dinescribe kanina na yung parang kapag nagsunog ka ng yung ipa ng bigas, ganun yung fire. Ganun yung galit na meron ang Panginoon. So Psalm 7 verse 12 naman po. Psalm 7:12. Hanapin, ano po
Psalm
yung
7,
yeah, go ahead.
verse ano teacher? 12.
12 po. Opo.
If he does not turn back, he will sharpen his sword. He bends his bow and makes it ready.
Alright, ano pong metaphor ang ginamit diyan?
Sword.
Alright, a sword na merong description eh. Hindi lang siya basta sword, but a
Sharpen.
alright, a sharpened sword. Sige, mamaya po titingnan natin lahat yan. Baba naman po kayo ng verse 13. Same verse po, Psalm 7, verse 13. Same text pala, sorry. Same text po, verse 13 lang. Ano po sabi sa verse?
Deadly weapons. Fiery shafts.
All right. Fiery shafts or fiery arrows. Okay, so a fire that consumes, a sharpened sword, a fiery arrow na ginagamit to ng mga warriors nila before. Na lalo kapag kahit na yung mga bow and arrow nila yung sinisilaban sa apoy, tapos yun yung pinangpapana nila. So that's that expresses or that describes the anger or the wrath of God. In Jeremiah 30 verse 23.
Jeremiah, ano ba? Jeremiah
30 verse 23.
Jeremiah 30 verse 23. Behold, the whirlwind of the Lord goes forth with fury, continuing whirlwind, it will fall violently on the head of the wind.
Okay po, so ano po yung metaphor na ginamit dyan? So next slide. Again. A what?
Whirlwind.
A whirlwind or sa akin pong translation, it's a sweeping tempest or para siyang storm, a violent storm. Okay, so ganun po yung described as ganun po yung describe yung wrath of God. Another metaphor po is found in Nahum 1:8.
Nahum 1:8, but with an overflowing flood, he will make an utter end of its place, and darkness will pursue his enemies.
All right, metaphor there.
Overflowing flood.
Overflowing ng flood. So, ganun po yung idea na to. And then, last po, natitignan nating metaphor is in Revelation. Revelation 14:19. Revelation 14:19.
49.
Revelation 14:19.
So the angels will sickle to the earth and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God.
Alright, so ano po yung term na ginamit ang metaphor? A what?
Good. Ito.
Great wine press.
Alright, a great wine press. So this is referring to sa process pag naggagawa ng alak, di ba po? Pinipress nila yung fruit. So ganyan po yung expression, yung description ng wrath of God. So ayan po yung iba't ibang metaphors na ginamit to describe the wrath of God. It's a fire that consumes, a sharpened sword, a fiery arrow, sweeping tempest, overflowing flood, and a great wine press. Now, sa mga metaphors po na yan, ano po yung tungkol sa wrath of God? What do these metaphors communicate to us about the wrath of God? Paano niyo po nakikita ngayon yung wrath of God? Diyan po sa mga metaphors na yan.
Yung intensity ng wrath ng Panginoon, dinidescribe sa mga metaphor.
Alright, the intensity, so, ganun kalalim yung galit ng Panginoon sa kasalanan at sa makasalanan. Na kung titingnan natin yung mga metaphors na yan, mabubuhay ka ba dyan? No, iko-consume ka ng fire, a sharpened sword, a fiery arrow, sweeping tempest, overflowing a great wine. So ganun po kagalit ang Panginoon sa kasalanan at sa makasalanan. Now, what do the texts, no, sa dami ng mga verses na tiningnan natin, ano-ano ngayon ang tinuturo nito about the wrath of God? Una po, na nakita natin dyan is God's indignation or yung wrath. God's indignation is a result of His righteousness. No? Totoo po na mabuti ang Panginoon. Totoo na God is love. But He is also a righteous God. No, na it is because of His righteousness that He has judgment sa mga wicked at sa mga sinners. So yung holiness, yung love, yung righteousness ng Panginoon, it's what caused Him to hate sin at it is what caused Him na mag-express ng terrible at violent wrath against sin. Okay, so God's indignation is a result of His righteousness. Letter B, God's indignation is the result of man's continued rebellion. No. Totoo po na God is compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in loving kindness. He will pardon yung mga repentant sinner, but yung mga unrepentant sinner, it makes himself an object of God's wrath. And letter C, no, ito po yung pinaka-point ng mga napag-aralan nating terms, no. God purposely and actively comes against the sinner with His wrath. No, hindi lang yung suffering ng mga sinners, hindi lang siya natural consequence of sin, but it is the result of God's active judgment. Tandaan niyo, ang Panginoon ang magre-reveal nito sa unrepentant sinner. Po ang biblical descriptions of the wrath of God. And this ends yung lesson natin about the wrath of God. Next week po, I will still be on the lesson ng God's disposition sa sin, but ibang disposition naman po ang pag-aaralan. And that marks the end of our lesson this morning. Thank you po and good morning.
Salamat, Teacher Ira, sa ating lesson na natapos. And hilingin po natin si Brother Rico to close us in prayer.
Tayo po'y manalangin. Panginoon, maraming salamat sa araw na ito. Kami po'y nakarinig muli o nakapag-aral muli, Panginoon, sa iyong banal na mga salita. Maraming salamat, Lord, sa lahat ng mga biyaya na binigay mo sa amin ngayon. And for this Sunday School service, thank you, Lord, sa lahat na aming natutunan. And we hope na ito'y aming mai-apply at kami matatakot sa Panginoon na umiwas sa kasalanan, Panginoon. So itong lahat aming pinapanalangin sa pangalan ni Jesus. Amen.